Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. As part of a big news today, we'll be discussing an important day and an anniversary with regards to the Janjatiya Gaurav Divas or Birsa Munda's birth anniversary. It's an important moment in tribal history in India itself. Therefore, it becomes important for the civil services exam itself. Before we discuss that, an important announcement that on YouTube tomorrow we'll have the International Relations This Week episode 94 by Chetan sir, and I hope that you're not going to miss this session for every news related to international relations in the last 1 week. With this, let's discuss the Janjatiya Gaurav Divas, or what we call as the Birsa Munda anniversary. It's an important moment with regards to tribal history in India because last year 15th November was declared as Janjatiya Gaurav Divas, dedicated to the memory of the brave tribal freedom fighters. And when it comes to this day itself, it is a celebration of tribal culture, their contribution, and it commemorates important personalities related to tribal history in India and tribal freedom fighters in that regard. It is also 15th November is also the same day on which Birsa Munda was born. Birsa Munda himself, very important personality with regards to the national movement itself. But why are we discussing the Janjatiya Gaurav Divas? The context of this is technically tribal movements in India and colonial policies. Just to give you a basic recap of the static portion which is behind this concept, is the fact that when the British came through in India, they introduced specific policy with regards to forests, and forests being the zone of the tribals, via the process of forest policy, the tribals were alienated. They were alienated from their land. There was a lot of intrusions from what they used to call outsiders. The zamindars and the moneylenders entered into tribal zones itself and produced a lot of alienation, distress and poverty in the tribal sector itself. Therefore, it was the colonial policy, the British impact, which in turn led to the Chota Nagpur Plateau and specifically the tribal population in India becoming at one point of time so poverty stricken that there was a need to intervene with regards to these important leaders in that sense. So the Munda uprising, be it the Santhal uprising, Kol, we have a whole plethora, list of different tribal uprisings in India. But what is common to all of them is that most of them are going against what we call as colonial intermediaries, which is either the zamindars or the moneylenders or the officers. But Birsa Munda was much different in this story because Birsa Munda understood that it was not the intermediaries who were the problem, it was the British which was the problem. So when we talk about the Janjatiya Gaurav Divas, it is an important moment in Indian history because when we talk about this Divas, it is about the tribals starting to resist the British rule in India. And when we talk about the revolt of 1857, the peasant and tribal movements themselves technically build up to the revolt of 1857. The revolt of 1857 is a culmination of all these processes. Therefore, these important personalities become very, very important. So the first point which you need to remember is that why are we discussing this day? Because technically tribal freedom fighters created the context in which revolt of 1857 was possible. At the same point of time, it is important to remember that at the end of the day, it was colonial policy which in turn led to the displacement of these tribals, and they were the first to resist colonial Raj, company Raj in India. And therefore, be it the Santhal uprising, Kol uprising, Rampa, all of them are important contributions in the larger story of the national movement itself. So the first point, as you remember, is colonial policies. Remember forest policy, the concept of intermediaries and outsiders entering the tribal zones, and the fact of the matter being that the land revenue settlements which were introduced into the tribal areas displaced them, and that created the context for the uprising itself. With regards to this, let's try to understand the important moments. This is not an exhaustive list, but one of the few very important personalities with regards to tribal history in India. So we already know that there were the Santhals, Khasis, Bhils, Mizos and the Kols. All of them rebelled in their own form against either the intermediary or the British itself, and they create the base on which the revolt of 1857 happens and the national movement itself happens. Birsa Munda in himself is a very iconic freedom fighter, social reformer and revered tribal leader in the country itself. He was the first to move beyond intermediaries and say that it was the exploitative nature of the British colonial government and not the intermediaries which was the problem. He understood the root of the cause rather than the branches of colonialism. He looked at colonialism itself, and that is why throughout his lifetime he was revered and sometimes also called Bhagwan Birsa Munda. Now when we talk about Birsa Munda himself, the Munda uprising during this period was extremely important because the British for the first time were defeated by a tribal army, and the stature of Birsa Munda himself was extremely important because it created an important precedence that leaders can mobilize people with its weaknesses of being localized these tribal movements were showing that resistance to Raj was becoming more and more diverse. At the same point of time, we have Shaheed Veer Narayan Singh. He was the first martyr from Chhattisgarh in the revolt of 1857. We have a very towering figure, very important figure, Sri Alluri Sitaram Raju, which is the Rampa rebellion against the British in the Andhra region. And we also have Sidhu and Kanhu Murmu, two very important personalities in the Santhal uprising. These Santhal, Bhil, Kol and the Munda. These are the four basic, what we call as pillars of the tribal movement in India itself. But this is technically not the exhaustive list. We have a whole plethora of leaders who became very, very important in the northeastern sector in the Chota Nagpur plateau, who made sure that the tribal interest and the tribal concept went forward, and the British also had to respond at each and every point of time. Now, how are we commemorating this important moment? Firstly, the president will be putting a garland on the statue of freedom fighter Birsa Munda in his birthplace, Ulihatu village in Jharkhand. She will then attend a very mega event with coordination with the Jharkhand government on 15th at Khunti in Jharkhand. Thereafter, there are also other ministries which are coming together to celebrate this moment. TriFed, which is a Tribal Cooperative Marketing Development Federation, will host an Adi Mahotsav at the Gramin Hut in Indore, and parallel Adi Mahotsav, Adi Bazaars will be set up in Bhubaneswar, Guwahati, Puducherry and Dehradun. The Ministry of Education under the leadership of Union Education and Skill Development and Minister Shri Dharmendra Pradhan will also be celebrating the Janjatiya Gaurav Divas in a grand manner in schools, skill and higher education institutions across the country. But these are the different forms in which we are honoring the tribal history of India. Before I end the session, what I want to talk about are three very basic things. That is why we are discussing it in big news. First, this is an important moment because this was declared last year itself. Second, you need to know that it is colonial policy with regards to forest policy, the intrusion of intermediaries and outsiders, which displays the tribals, and the tribal movement itself becomes a very important moment with regards to creating the foundation for resistance in the form of revolt of 1857. And thereafter, we have very important personalities who have in turn produced the context in which we have so much rich history of resistance to Raj, and these leaders created the context in which the national movement itself became possible. So with this, I would like to end this session. Thank you so much for your patience. I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.